You're listening to Missing Persons, brought to you by AbJack Entertainment. Be sure to check out some of the other great true crime podcasts from this network, including The Murder in My Family, DNA ID, Zodiac Speaking, Scene of the Crime,
Beyond Bizarre True Crime,
Citizen Detective, and
Campus Killings.
All of these podcasts are available for you to binge on right now, wherever you listen to podcasts. Subscribe where you're listening to this podcast so you don't miss an episode.
The views and opinions expressed by guests on this podcast do not necessarily represent those of the podcast, its creators, or sponsors. If you would like to discuss a missing persons case on this podcast, please be sure to visit missingpersonspodcast.net. This episode may contain unsettling or disturbing subject matter. Listener discretion is advised.
If you'd like to support Missing Persons and get VIP access to things like ad-free listening, early preview episodes, and bonus content of not only this show, but for every other podcast on the AbJack network of indie podcasts, consider subscribing to the show with an AbJack Insider subscription through Apple Podcast. For only $4.99 a month or $49.99 a year, you'll unlock a variety of listener benefits, and you'll be supporting the show in the process. Your support is greatly appreciated.
Welcome to Missing Persons, a podcast dedicated to spreading the word about people who have vanished under mysterious or unexplained circumstances and the family members who are looking for answers. I'm Jess Betancourt.
And I'm Mike Morford. Together, we created this podcast to help give a voice to people who continue to search for their missing loved ones. In some cases, even after decades have gone by. In each episode, you'll hear from Jess giving listeners the backstory and the basic facts of the disappearance.
Then Mike will speak with someone who's intimately connected to the missing person, and his guest will share their story with us. So sit back and enjoy this episode, and who knows, maybe you can help us find someone who's missing. Today, we are talking about the longest-running parental abduction missing persons case in the United States. Lisa Mae Zaharias, age 15 months, and Christopher Zaharias, age 3.5, were abducted by their mother, Susan Gammill Zaharias, on November 20th, 1987, from the home they shared with Susan's husband Lou in Mission Viejo, California. This was not a case in which the parents were separated or divorced or feuding. No custodial battle was raging. According to Louis Zaharias, who is our guest today, his wife Susan was addicted to drugs after a bout of postpartum depression and was in legal trouble after writing bad checks and otherwise skipping out on bills. Orange County authorities were building a case against her, and her secret was about to be discovered by her husband after his mother, visiting from out of state, began witnessing Susan's interactions with creditors and raising questions. A little background. Susan and Lou met in 1977 when Susan was just 17 and Lou was 23. She was a receptionist at Western State University Law School, where he was a first-year student, or 1L as they're called. According to Lou, the two fell for each other fast and hard, but they came from very different religious and cultural backgrounds. Susan's family did not accept Lou. When Susan turned 18, she left her family to be with Lou, and the two married in 1981 and had 2 children together, Christopher in 1984, and then Lisa Mae 2 years later in 86. Lou admits that he battled with a drug problem and that Susan helped him get clean. They lived in New York for a time near Lou's family, but eventually Susan wanted to return to her native California. So they moved back to the Golden State, and Lou worked as a lawyer at MetLife in Orange while Susan stayed home with the kids. But unfortunately, she then experienced postpartum depression after the birth of Lisa Mae and became addicted to hard drugs as she self-medicated. She began spending Lou's paycheck on drugs, failing to pay the household bills, including utilities and car payments, and eventually she was charged with check fraud. Everything came to a head when Lou's mom came to visit for Thanksgiving in 1987. She stayed home with Susan while Lou went to work and started to notice that creditors were calling and Susan was hiding something. After she informed Lou of this, Susan and Lou had an altercation. After he left the home, according to Lou, Susan assaulted his mother, took the kids, and abruptly left. Lou tells us that Susan's flight was aided and funded by Susan's wealthy and powerful family. He has stated that Susan's aunt, Shirley Cann, along with her grandmother, Louise Hettinger, took Susan and the children to Riverside, California, and then sent them to Oklahoma to her sister, Juliana Nosal, and her parents. Susan and the kids have also been known to be in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Washington, and New Jersey. Lou quickly filed for legal separation and was awarded custody of the missing children. Susan, having absconded, failed to deliver the children, was charged with parental abduction, and a felony extradition warrant for Susan for crimes against persons was issued on February 17, 1988. That warrant remains active today. Susan is listed in NCIC, so if she ever has any interaction with law enforcement anywhere in the United States, she will be arrested immediately and returned to California. Lou filed a civil lawsuit in Oklahoma against Susan's family for tortious interference with parental custodial rights and for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Interference with parental custodial rights was not a recognized tort in Oklahoma, and although the Oklahoma Supreme Court refused to allow Lou's claim to proceed, they did rule that Lou would be permitted to sue the third parties, Susan's parents, for intentional infliction of emotional distress under Oklahoma law. Because of testimonial and other evidence tending to connect members of Susan's family to the abduction, which could be deemed behavior constituting intentional infliction of emotional distress under Oklahoma law, the family settled with Lou out of court for an undisclosed amount of cash. But this legal victory did not result in Christopher and Lisa Mae, now well into adulthood, being reunited with their father. Prosecutors have declined to charge Susan's family members with any crimes. After suffering several emotional breakdowns, in 2013, Lou engaged PI Services Klein Investigations to advocate for him. He said Philip Klein's work has forced the Orange County authorities and the California Department of Justice to actively work his missing children's case. The OCDA's office is now working with Klein Investigations, and the Orange County Sheriff's Office, the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the U.S. Marshals are involved with the search for Christopher and Lisa Mae. The case has also been sent to Interpol in case Susan and the children have moved to another country. In March of 2015, composites of Christopher and Lisa Mae were created by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, showing what they might look like as adults. In 2016, Susan's mother, Noma Jean Gammill, died. Her obituary listed among her surviving relatives daughters Susan and grandchildren Christopher and Lisa Mae. This confirms that Susan's family is still in contact with Susan and the kids and likely even knows their whereabouts. Lou has entered his DNA in many of the popular DNA websites like 23andMe and Ancestry in hopes that one day Christopher, Lisa Mae, or one of their children will upload, and they will be notified of a familial connection. He believes that it's very likely that the children were brainwashed into believing that he was dead or that Susan took them because he was abusive and dangerous. To the contrary, he says, he loves Christopher and Lisa Mae and would do anything to be reunited with them. Louis Zaharias sat down to talk with Mike Morford about his children's abduction. That conversation is coming up after a word from our sponsors.
I'd like to tell you about our sponsor, HelloFresh. What is HelloFresh? It's America's #1 meal kit. With HelloFresh, you get farm-fresh, pre-portioned ingredients and seasonal recipes delivered right to your doorstep. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. We all know home-cooked meals are so much better for you, but you don't always have the time to pull it off. But with HelloFresh, handling all the meal planning, shopping, and most of the prep, it's easier than ever to get dinner on the table quick and painless. Choose from a variety of menu options to suit all your needs and taste, from fit and wholesome to quick and easy. We're vegetarian to family friendly. There's something for everyone to enjoy. My wife and I just tried the warm buttered shrimp rolls, and they were out of this world. It took just over 30 minutes to make, and everything came packaged and ready to go, saving us time. Do you want to try HelloFresh? Well, do I have some great news for you. Listeners of Missing Persons can get free breakfast for life from HelloFresh. You heard me right. For free breakfast for life, go to HelloFresh.com/freepersons. You'll get one free breakfast item per box while your subscription is active. That's free breakfast for life just by going to HelloFresh.com/freepersons. Once again, that's HelloFresh.com/freepersons. Try HelloFresh today. It's America's #1 meal kit. Welcome to Missing Persons. Louis, I'm happy to have you here. We want to talk about your family's case and get the word out about what you've been fighting for the last, better part of, 3-4 decades almost.
Yeah, it's actually going into the 38th year. Um, it's the oldest active unsolved criminal parental kidnapping case in the United States right now.
Yeah, it is a lot different than many of the cases we cover on this show because, a lot of times the cases we cover, we don't know who's involved. We don't have any clues about what happened to the person. They just dropped off the face of the earth. But your kids, Christopher and Lisa, we know who took them. That was your wife, Sue. And despite having those clues coming up on almost 40 years, as you mentioned, that you've been separated from your children, we don't have a resolution. So we're going to get into a lot of the details of the case and how things unfolded, how they got to where they are. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about your kids and your family life back in 1987 when they went missing? What was going on in your life and in the life of your wife, Sue? How long had you been together and what was life like?
Well, in 1987, I was working for a great law firm up in Los Angeles. We lived in Mission Viejo, which was about a 2-hour commute one way. So one of the factors was I was commuting 4 hours a day and working 8 to 10 hours a day. And Sue was home alone with Christopher and Lisa Mae, who was only 15 months. And Sue had started suffering after her birth, of Lisa Mae's birth, with postpartum depression. She didn't have it so much with Christopher, but the circumstances of our living were different when we had Christopher. When Christopher was born in 1984, we were living back in New York, and my family was there to help Sue, my aunts, my uncles, my mother. Everybody lended support. But by 1987, we had moved to California. We had been there since 85. I had gotten this job. I was doing really well. I was offered an associateship even before I took the California bar exam. We were on our way after a long, turbulent time from 1977 when we met. I met Sue on my first day of law school, August 22nd, 1977. And we were together approximately 10 and a half years. But what was unfortunate, and then leading up to the day of the kidnapping, Sue's family were diametrically opposed to our relationship. I was a few years older than her, and they were Southern Baptist from Oklahoma, Anglo-Saxon, what you call WASPs. And I was an Italian Catholic from New York City, from the Bronx. And almost immediately, they didn't give me a chance. They pretty much had a raging bigotry, prejudice, hatred for me and my background. In fact, a couple years after we were living together, Sue wrote a letter to her family about the intense hatred that they had, trying to reconcile with them. And along the way, I did so. I wrote letters, sent messages, tried so hard to bring everybody together, but there was no chance. In fact, the letter that Sue wrote was introduced into evidence in the subsequent custody cases that I filed against the family, because you had mentioned earlier that Susan was the kidnapper, but she wasn't acting independently. She was acting in concert with 10 other people in 3 states. And the oil company that her family owned, they were using it to, for lack of a better word, launder phone calls through telephone cards that were in existence at the time. They don't exist anymore, but you could use this long distance calling card, and it wouldn't go on your home phone. It would go to whatever assigned number the card was for. So now to step backward, in 1987, as I said, I was working, and I was out of the house about 14, 15 hours a day. And Sue was suffering from postpartum depression, and she was supposed to be taking medications that our family doctor prescribed for her. But so sadly, we lived in a condo complex where there was a cocaine dealer, and Sue befriended the cocaine dealer's girlfriend, and Sue started self-medicating with cocaine. And she not only did that, but she had another friend who was providing crystal meth, crank, speed to Susan. And she was essentially doing a chemical cocktail of cocaine and crystal meth. And she was becoming increasingly paranoid and bizarre in her conduct, in her statements.
How long a time period was this over that this all happened?
Okay, I would say it started from about January of 1987 through November of 1987. Up until that January, things were okay. I was doing well, like I said. And then I started being out of the house, and I have to take the blame for some of the things that may have affected Sue and her mental dysfunction, because I was working so long and so hard. When I came home at night, I pretty much only had eyes for the kids, and I did neglect her in the sense that I always tried to spend as much time with my son, who was 3.5 years old. A lot of daddy son things we did on the weekends. I would always leave the house with him, go to the beach, bring home breakfast. So Sue was feeling neglected. She was constantly, like I said, with her family, it was never ending for 10 years. She was constantly being bombarded by their hatred, and they had always tried to break us up. They had refused to use her married name. They would send letters in her maiden name. They never used my name. They referred to me as the greaseball guinea from the Bronx. For 10 years, I didn't have a name. And this is all documented. And they refused to acknowledge the children as being my children. It's almost like she had a immaculate conception in their minds. And they would, now this part I'm going to tell you came from testimony after the kidnapping, but it really comes into play here. Her friends had testified that her parents were telling her, because she had become physically deteriorated. She was about 5'7" and was losing weight. She was down to about 89 pounds, very gaunt. And with me, I would ask her, are you doing anything? And she always had an answer. Like, no, the doctor said because of my depression, I've developed anorexia. I'm having trouble eating because of the medication.
So she was denying what was going on, basically.
Yeah, and she was playing to a very gullible audience in me. I loved Sue. I loved her more than I can tell you, and I've never gotten remarried. She was the love of my life, and back in the 70s when we met, and we were doing drugs in Huntington Beach, I was the one who was out of control, and she literally saved my life. I OD'd on what they call crack now, but it was freebase back in those days. The same stuff that Richard Pryor caught on fire with. Very dangerous stuff. And she saved my life. She got me into rehab. So here's the girl who is my best friend since 1977, the mother of my children, literally my lifesaver, and she could tell me anything. I trusted her implicitly. But when, if anybody knows anything about coke and crystal meth, you develop a really intense paranoia, and you become susceptible to really negative influences. And her family was telling her over the course of these months leading up to the abduction, oh, look at you, you're a piece of shit, you're a drug addict. He's going to get custody, he's going to find out, he's going to take the kids away from you, you'll never see them again. The cops will throw you in jail. And the reason that I say that was, as part of the drug addiction, she was using every bit of my pay, because I didn't even get my check on Friday. She would come to the law firm and pick it up. I never passed through my hands. She would endorse it on the back, deposit it, get the cash, and go buy drugs. And she was starting to paper the entire city of Mission Viejo with rubber checks, and they were bouncing. Our family accountant, after she left, and he did an accounting of our books, we could figure out that she wrote somewhere over $6,000 in bad checks. And a letter came saying that she was under investigation by the Orange County Fraud Unit of the Sheriff's Office for writing worthless checks. And I think I mentioned in a previous conversation that we had initially, this kidnapping could have been averted if two sheriff's deputies came to our house 2 days after the kidnapping. The kidnapping was November 20th, 1987. They came about the 22nd to arrest her and take her to jail for check fraud. If they had just come a couple of days earlier, the kidnapping would have been averted.
Wow.
But her timing was impeccable. And gradually, as things led up to the date of November 20th, to take a step backward, back in June of 1987, she came to me weeping and sobbing and saying that she got in trouble, and she promised if I would help her get out of debt because drug dealers were after her for money. I had a show car that I was going to give to Christopher, but I took a $5,000 loan out on it and paid off her drug dealers. She swore up and down, left and right, that she was going to stop. She was going to go to the doctor. She was going to take care of everything and do the right thing. But unbeknownst to me, she kept doing it. And even when I asked her why she wasn't gaining weight, like I said previously, she had an answer for everything. And I believed her. And then we found out that she wasn't taking Christopher to his preschool. She was using that money for drugs. He was prescribed speech therapy. She was using that money for drugs. And she stole $30,000 from my mom.
Wow.
So she was in trouble on a lot of levels.
Just to recap, there's a lot going on. She's got the postpartum. She's doing the drugs. She has a family in the background that's already talking to her, it sounds like leading her against you. So there's a lot of things going on here in all at once, it seems like.
Absolutely. And her rantings were getting so bizarre. Actually, believe it or not, two drug dealers actually came forward after the kidnapping and testified under oath. Now, they took the Fifth Amendment a lot, not to incriminate themselves, but they were able to impart enough of the backstory to let us know that she was really going out of her mind. She was torn between the betrayal that she did with me after she promised me in June that she was going to stop, and the easy way out her family were offering her. They essentially told her, if you steal the kids, we'll take care of everything, we'll help you disappear, and you'll never have to worry about going to jail or getting caught or losing custody. Also, her friends were saying that she actually revealed in her drug talk her plans. She told them that, and she embellished with, oh, Louis is in the mafia and there's a contract to have me killed. I need to go underground. My family said they would help me. I'm worried about getting caught by the drug dealers. In fact, she was saying that when I came home at night, I would handcuff her in the garage so she wouldn't have food to eat, which is insane. But that's what she was telling people, and it got to the point where a couple of drug dealers said to her, listen, just take your drugs and go home. We don't want you here. So, I was so wrapped up in my job and the children and loving her that I just didn't see it. But man, after you wanted to know, after the abduction, well, in the first couple of days, she had a walk-in closet, and I wasn't the kind of husband that went into my wife's purse or went into her private space, and her walk-in closet was her private space. And Michael, what we found in there was unbelievable. There were notices from the banks about non-sufficient funds. There were warning notices from the utility companies, the phone company, the cable company, the bottled water guy, about bills not being paid. We discovered that she had changed the address on every creditor to a secret mailbox that she maintained at mailboxes, etc., where all the letters and notices were being redirected so that I wouldn't see any of the mail. And at night when I got home, she would say, "Oh, you've been gone all day working hard. Why don't we unplug the phone so that we're not disturbed while you play with the kids?" So I wasn't getting any of this. But when we went into that closet, it was a rude awakening. There was so much in there. And what she did was she ripped up the children's birth certificates, any identification, social security card, anything that we had for them. She ripped up, and she didn't even bother throwing it away. She just threw it into boxes filled with all this paperwork from the
Wow.
creditors.
Wow. You find all this crazy stuff that she's got that it's sort of you weren't aware of. It's in the closet. I want to back up a second to the day that she took the kids. How did that day specifically unfold for you? How did you find out they were missing? What happened that day that led up to you finding the stuff in the closet?
Okay, so I had, as I said, I went to work in LA 2 hours away. So I was up about 5 o'clock in the morning to shower, shave, get dressed, and drive to Los Angeles. Well, November 20th, 1987 was a Friday, and Friday, as I said before, was payday. But what had happened was a few days earlier, my mom came out from New York to visit us for Thanksgiving weekend and spend some time with her grandchildren. And she got there about the 16th or 17th of November. Now, my mom was home alone with Susan the 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th. And that's when the phone would ring and creditors would call. And if my mom answered, she'd ask Susan, and Susan would say, "Oh, there's a computer glitch, or the check is in the mail, or, oh, I made a mistake in the checkbook, I'll resend it." So my mom started questioning her about the finances. And the night before the kidnapping, November 19th, I had come home, and my mom was very concerned because Susan was in a very elevated state of anxiety and short-tempered and isolation. My mom had, again, the waterman had come to the door and demanded payment for the water bottles, and my mom paid him, and my mom told me about it, and I asked Sue about it, and she said, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it." She stormed upstairs and wouldn't come down and talk. So I figured, well, we'll discuss it fresh in the morning. So Friday, November 20th, the date of the kidnapping, I woke up, and there was Susan standing over me, saying, "I got to come to LA and get your paycheck, but I don't want to leave your mom home alone here. She's going to go into my closet. I want my privacy. I don't want to leave without knowing that my privacy is protected, but I got to get your check." So I was like, "Okay, Sue, I'll call in. I'll go in late. I'll run over to the hardware store and put a locking doorknob on your closet if that's what you want." And she said, "Yeah, but she just kept going on and ranting. I even went in for a shower, and she followed me into the bathroom and was saying that she feels like ever since my mom got there, she was being under surveillance and being watched and questioned. And she was building to a really intense state of aggression." So when I got out of the shower and started to get dressed, I was starting to lose my temper, and I was saying, what the hell is wrong with you? And I went downstairs to go have breakfast, and she was nonstop, relentless with the arguing about her leaving my mother home there alone. So I said to her, "Why don't you just go outside and cool off?" And um, I went outside. She was outside. My mom was outside, and we had like a 3 or 4 step stoop in front of the door, and there was a screen door, and we were arguing, and apparently one of my neighbors was in his car observing all this, who he later testified, and I'm really thankful that he was there. So I started to go back into the condo, and Sue started screaming, raced up the steps, and attacked me from behind and raked the back of my neck with her fingernails. I turned around to try and push her away, and she scratched my arm, she scratched my face, threw punches at me. I was able to get back into the house. She came in and just was relentlessly kicking and throwing punches. And I didn't want to fight with my wife. I mean, have a physical fight. So I left, and I left thinking that my mom would be able to calm her down, but I later found out that was not what happened. But we were all crying. Everybody was crying. The kids were crying. It was total chaos. So I retreated. I got out of there, and I got into my car, and I knew I couldn't go to work. I didn't have any dress clothes. Plus, I was bleeding from my arms, from my neck. So I went to a hotel or a motel, the Comfort Inn, a few blocks away from the condo, and took a shower, got cleaned up, figured I'd give it about an hour or so, and then I would go back and see if we couldn't work things out, find out what the problem was. I had called my boss and told him I wouldn't be in that day. I was going to be out absent. And when I got back home, my mom was out in front of the condo, and she was all bruised. And what had happened was Sue attacked her, beat her up, ripped the baby out of my mother's arms, grabbed Christopher, pushed my mom down the steps, stepped over her, and left my mom in the street, and took off. And that's the last time we ever saw her. We do know from phone records and from my mom's testimony that there was a phone call that Sue made to Oklahoma, where her family was, and there was some kind of talking going on. My mom couldn't hear because she was downstairs with the kids, and Susan was upstairs on the phone, and the phone records bore it out. Oh, and another interesting thing about the phone records, generally, Sue spoke to her family maybe, once or twice every 10 days or so. But as it got closer to the kidnapping, the number of phone calls between our house and Oklahoma and Detroit, where her sister lived, Riverside, where her aunt lived, and these are all co-conspirators in the kidnapping, and Lake Elsinore, where her grandmother lived, was like it exploded exponentially. They were all interacting with each other by phone, and we got their phone records through the court cases. And my lawyer at the time got a statistical analyst expert, and it showed that the statistics were off the charts with them calling each other. And that's what they were doing. They were planning the kidnapping. Everybody knew their role because what happened after Sue left the house and I got back, I immediately saw my mom. She told me Sue took the kids. And by this time, it was 11 o'clock in the morning. So Christopher should have been at his preschool. I shot over to the preschool. He wasn't there. I drove to Lake Elsinore to her grandmother's house. She wasn't there. And eventually I went back home and I was terrified. I didn't know what to do. I called her sister-in-law or my sister-in-law in Detroit. I got her husband, who said he didn't know anything. He hadn't heard anything, and he was very aloof and evasive. Ultimately, we found out he was deeply involved in the kidnapping. And then what transpired from there all came out in the court cases, because they weren't cooperating with the police. They were telling lies. We were exposing their lies. They were obstructing justice, and we found out that what happened was Sue went to her aunt's in Riverside, filed a false police report with the Riverside police instead of Orange County, which she should have done. But her aunt was very rich, influential resident of Riverside, so the cops took what they call a courtesy report. And here's another sad part of the mentality of the police at the time. All a woman had to do, they talk about the Me Too movement, but back in the 80s, it was beyond Me Too. All a woman had to do was say, he beat me up or he hit me. And she actually told the cops that she took the kids and she was hiding at her aunt's house, and that I didn't know where my own children were. And all they had to do was get on the NCIC, the National Crime Information Computer, and they would have seen that I made a police report early in the morning when I got back for child abduction and also battery on my mom and assault and battery on me. And they would have seen that there was an active Orange County kidnapping case, but there were no Amber Alerts in those days. There was nothing. Everything was skewed against the man. I felt, and I kept telling the cops if I don't know how to express it, but at the moment I came home from the hotel, my mom said Sue took the kids. Every bizarre statement, every weird action, everything that occurred all gelled in my mind, and it hit me. She's running off with the kids. She's kidnapping the kids. Her family finally got to her.
Wow. So you basically went right out, filed reports saying my wife has taken the kids. You mentioned the assault, that you filed for that too. So you make a record right away with the police. How long after that did she make one in Riverside?
It was the next day on the 21st.
Okay.
So mine was already on the computer on the 20th. So on the 21st, and then by that time, her grandmother had driven from Lake Elsinore to Riverside. They put her on a plane and flew her and the kids and the grandmother out to Oklahoma. When she got to Oklahoma, they sent her to an aunt's house in Ada, where she hid out. She tried to get into a battered women's shelter, which we found out through investigation, and they actually threw her out because they caught her doing drugs and she wasn't paying attention to the kids, and they really didn't believe her story. And we had a sworn declaration from the manager or the director of the shelter. So when that didn't work, she then fled to Detroit, Michigan, where her sister stayed. And her sister and my ex-brother-in-law held my children captive for 3 weeks while I was calling them. The Adam Walsh Child Resource Center was calling them. That's John Walsh's organization. Eventually, it merged into the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. The Vanished Children's Alliance was calling them. Child Quest International. And we also later, when they got served by a process server with my lawsuit, the process server swore out a declaration identifying my daughter with my ex-brother-in-law. His name is John Nosel. He was supposed to be a priest in the Eastern Orthodox religion, but I don't know of any priest that destroys families rather than works to try and keep them together. But he was another one who was filled with hatred and a need for revenge. And the reason I say revenge is going back to 1978, when Sue was still living with her parents before she moved in with me. They gave her an ultimatum. They said, stop seeing the grease ball or get out of our house. Well, she was 18 by then, and she moved out of the house because we loved each other. And from that moment on, they said, I stole their daughter away from them. Now, we're talking about an 18-year-old girl who was given an ultimatum and who made an adult decision to move out of the house. But they justified stealing my kids, infants, who had no due process, no equal protection under the law, and that justified them stealing my kids. I stole their daughter, so they stole my kids.
Wow. How long a time period was it that you were able to piece together the family's involvement in helping Sue?
That was a real struggle because, like I said, number one, the FBI didn't want to get involved because they considered it a domestic matter. The Orange County District Attorney's Child Abduction Unit had a policy of not getting involved if there was any kind of court case, civil court case, or dissolution, divorce matter on the court's calendar. And again, I felt like I was the boy crying wolf because I kept telling everyone, she's not going to show up in court. She's going to never show up. This is a kidnapping. But they wouldn't believe me. In fact, the Orange County Sheriff's deputy, a Deputy Lum, who I'll never forget, when I was calling and crying and begging for my children and telling her that this was a kidnapping, she laughed at me. She literally laughed and made snarky remarks because all she cared about was the lies that Susan told the Riverside police. So
and what did she accuse you of exactly? Like abuse?
I was in the mafia, that I beat her up. I mean, everything from being a contract killer to kicking puppies. I mean, it was the entire gamut of anything that a bad person could do. I mean, unbelievable. And it was like it was written in gold because a woman said it. But boy, oh boy, since then, we've seen that women can be horrible mothers. Look at Susan Smith, who murdered her children, and the two little boys, she drowned them in the car. or the woman who killed her 8 kids. When I was working for the Maricopa County District Attorney's Office in the child abuse unit, there was a woman who killed her baby and threw it in a sewer. I mean, just because you're female doesn't make you the all-time mother of the year. But it took decades for people to accept what was always a horrible myth. There are good fathers. There are men who, like me, had a biological imperative to be a dad.
So you feel like early on that you were basically, your concerns were cast aside in favor of Sue's version of events.
Yes, and finally, February 14th of 1988, so from November 20th, 1987, I didn't get to see my kids for Christmas, for Thanksgiving, for New Year's. Those holidays are forever burned in my soul, full of sadness. But it was 40 days later that the district attorney finally issued a warrant for her arrest and an extradition warrant for crimes against persons, child abuse, and check fraud. So after 40 days, that, most cases, they say, especially with children, need to be actively investigated within the first 24 to 48 hours. We're talking almost 48 days before they lifted a finger. So there was a lot that hurt in the beginning. And it was only because I worked with John Walsh and his organization that they gave me a lot of pathways and advice to get the ball rolling to try and find Sue. So I initiated custodial interference lawsuits in 3 states and hired private investigators. And then the evidence started rolling in. The drug dealers came forward, her friends came forward, my neighbor came forward that witnessed her attacking me. And then, the sad part is in 2008, I get an email from the district attorney who was working on the case at the time. And he says to me in this email, and I still have it, I have boxes and boxes of documents. This is before computers and scanning. And he said to me, if we knew then what we know now, and he italicized the word now, we would have handled your case differently. Sorry is what I get. And by that time, my kids were gone. 20 years?
Wow. So you take all these steps, you get advice on what to do, how to challenge what's happened, her taking the kids. At some point, I'm assuming police and officials question her family. Were they cooperative? What answers did they give or not give when they were talked to?
Well, one of the sad facts in this country, and I experienced it personally, if you have enough money, if you're multi-millionaires, you get special treatment and you can get away with anything. It's really a sad fact. She was allegedly questioned by the chief of the Wetumpka, Oklahoma Police Department, where they resided, and he actually told the DA that Susan was never there. He lied for them. We found out that she was there with my son because her grandfather, her father's father, saw her and Sue personally, and he got into an argument with her parents that they were doing the wrong thing. So he actually swore out a statement against them, but they would not cooperate in any way. They hired not a lawyer, but teams of lawyer. You would think it was the O.J. Simpson trial because they had lawyers from 3 or 4 different law firms all working for them in 3 states, and they were throwing money at it like I couldn't imagine, because in the first 15 years, I spent $1 million on my entire retirement portfolio, stocks, bonds, annuities. We sold jewelry, antiques, the show car I told you about earlier, anything to help fund because it was a worldwide search, because they could have placed her anywhere in the world. And I eventually went bankrupt in 2010, spent everything. Right now, I live in what would qualify as a slum apartment, with a mattress on the floor. I had beautiful stickly furniture, handmade, which I sold. Never replaced the bedroom furniture. Sold my mother's antiques. We had a painting from 1850 that was worth thousands and thousands of dollars, sold to finance the search for the children. And then eventually, after going through private investigator after private investigator, because they would dump us as soon as we ran out of money, about 13 years ago, a gift from God walked into my life, Philip Klein of Klein Investigations and Consulting, and he's picked up the torch of searching for them pro bono. He has not charged me a dime in about 13 years, and he's still working diligently to try and locate the children. And he told me, Lou, I'll never quit. I want you to see your children before you die. I mean, because Mike, I was 33 when this occurred. I'm 70 now. I just got diagnosed with a tumor, which I have to go for a biopsy next month. I'm terrified. I've got all the ailments that an old man gets, and I'm scared.
So you're dealing with, physical ailments, but you've also dealt with a lot of emotional, mental health things, because this has been such a weight on your shoulders. Can you talk a little bit over the years of what you've experienced and what kind of toll this has taken on you?
Yes, I've actually been in the psychiatric hospital 4 times for nervous breakdowns. The first being in August of 1988. My daughter's birthday just passed. It was August 18th. So when her birthday came in 88, I just couldn't deal with it. I had a nervous breakdown and went into a psychological retreat in Buena Vista, Colorado, way up in the mountains, away from everything. I was there for several weeks. In 1992, after my Oklahoma case went to the Supreme Court, and I got a partial landmark decision in our favor, but partially it was denied, and I had a breakdown in 92. At that time, they put me on experimental psychotropic drugs, where I was essentially almost catatonic. It's where you shut out the world because you can't take the pain anymore. And I was on 24-hour seizure watch. because they were using drugs that could cause seizure if elevated to the maximum dosages, which they had me on. Then the worst one was in 2013 at Christmas time. Christmas was always special because I was actually their first Santa Claus. Susan had bought a Santa outfit for me to play Santa for them back in 1986 and 1985. So I was their first Santa. And then I was so far gone mentally and emotionally that I was on psychiatric disability from my job for an entire year. I had to go through intensive outpatient counseling, extended group therapy, individual therapy, on all kinds of medications. At one point, I was on 15 medications a day. And then I went back to work in 2014, and the last time was 2021. I had a breakdown in February of 2021. I was in the hospital for about 10 days, I think it was. It was just the culmination of a lot of stress and anxiety about Christopher's birthday coming up in March. And I just couldn't bear the thought of missing another birthday. Because you develop all these different illnesses. There's something called anniversary syndrome, where when a holiday or a birthday event or Father's Day comes, you get very distraught. You get general anxiety disorder because you don't want this date to come and pass and be another lost event in the life of you and your children. You develop what's called elevator syndrome, which if you get a lead, that's why now Philip is the only source I deal with, because lots of times the cops would call me over the years and say, "Oh, we got this lead we're working on," and then you get all built up. It's like an elevator going up to the top floor, and then they call you, well, they don't even call you, and you call the follow-up, and they say, "Oh, it fell through," and then you fall through too. You crash like the cable was broken, and you crash to the ground, and it's so tormenting and destructive. So now I don't get involved in the day-to-day investigations like I used to. And Philip, he's very kind-hearted, so he only contacts me if he thinks he's got something that he needs my input or he has questions about. And then, of course, post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is probably the worst of all of them, because what people don't understand about post-traumatic stress is you actually get locked into the moment of the trauma. And for me, it's being locked into that day when I pulled up to the condo and I saw my mom outside and her telling me Sue took off with the kids. And the events of that day replay over and over. It's like an endless loop of video that plays over and over, and it's so vivid. It's like you're watching it on a high definition TV and you can't escape it. You get locked in, and it gets triggered by certain things. I don't know if you got the email I sent you this weekend, but I had a terrible situation. I was triggered this weekend by a little girl who performed a song in the Ukraine, and she was surprised by her idols at an event, and man, the joy on her face, the happiness. I always wanted to give that to my daughter, and I never got to do it, and she's 38 now. I never got to see my daughter at 7. I never got to take her to a party or her first concert or teach my son how to drive or throw a ball. Think of every event over a 38-year period that you have with your children that live on in your memory, and you don't have them. You just see blank spaces. 38 birthdays for each child, 38 Christmases, 38 Father's Days. It's so empty. My heart has such a hole in it, man.
Yeah, I'm a father of 2, and I couldn't imagine losing my kids and not knowing where they're at, not having time with them. So, my heart goes out to you for all that you've been through, and you've kept up the fight. As tough as it's been, you still continue to fight. And you mentioned you've had help along the way with private investigator Phil Klein. He's worked pro bono to try and help you. I know you can't say a lot, and we hope to actually talk with him, hopefully, for the show, but I know you can't say too much because you don't want to risk the investigation. But what are some of the things that you can say about what he's found that maybe our listeners out there that might have information on know it? What should they be looking for, and what has Phil Klein found that might give us some clues?
Well, I think probably one of the most important things that Philip has done is he's established relationships with every major law enforcement agency, which is critical. He works with the Orange County District Attorney's Child Abduction Unit. He works with an agent from the FBI. He works with the U.S. Marshal's Office, and he's created relationships in certain areas of the country where we believe Susan might be living, or would visit. And what I would ask your listeners would be if you know a John Nosel, a Juliana Nosel, who are currently living in, I believe it's Egret Island, South Carolina. They formerly lived in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. Anybody in Hughes County, Oklahoma, or Riverside, California, Lake Elsinore, California. While some of the defendants have passed away, Sue could have established friendships or relationships, because we do know that she was in Detroit for 3 weeks, and Nosel's church, the Eastern Orthodox Church, helped him help her escape law enforcement. Also, she might still be in touch with her sister. In Washington State, there's a Susan Walker. It's Sue's niece. Susan Elizabeth Walker was named after my wife, Susan Elizabeth. They had a relationship. She might visit, or the kids might visit because they're cousins. It's very important that your listeners read up about our case on help find the Zaharias Children page on Facebook, or on any of the websites, America's Most Wanted, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, and they'll get information about the people that were involved in the places where it's possible for them to appear at one point or another, especially around the holidays. or birthday events.
Well, we'll definitely put all the links in there so people can find the right pages to learn more about the case. And, if they have tips or information, we'll definitely put that out there too, where they should contact. Um, at this point now, being that it's, almost 38 years, you've lost, as you've put it, so many Father's Days and birthdays and all that kind of stuff. How are you able to stay focused and hopeful that you'll see them again? And how hopeful are you that you will see them?
Well, a lot of prayer, and it's the one driving this force is I love them with every fiber of my being, man. They were the best thing I ever did in my life. They were the purest, most innocent thing I have ever known, and I've got to hear myself be called daddy again. And even if I can't establish a father-child relationship, I would like to be a force in their life, and possibly if I have grandchildren, there's so many unanswered questions. They're both, Christopher's 40, Lisa Mae is 38. They could have children. I would love to be a benevolent role, a factor in my grandchildren's life if they would give me a chance. And if they've been brainwashed through parent alienation syndrome, or they don't know about me, I know that we would have to go through reconciliation therapy or family reunification therapy, which I hope they would be amenable to. Anything so that 38 events is the end of the events that were lost. And that maybe next time this year, I will have been able to celebrate Lisa Mae's 39th birthday with her. And now we're approaching the holidays to look forward to next Thanksgiving and Christmas and New Year's together. That's all I've got to hang on to. And like I said, Philip, if I lost Philip, I think a big chunk of my hope would die a horrible death. And it's mostly just that one bridge to them is our blood, and we've got to know each other.
And if they are out there listening, or you could talk to them, you could say something to them, what would you want to say to them right now?
I have never stopped loving you and will always love you, and I'll be your dad till my last breath.
And it's just so clear how much you care and how much it still affects you, like it was yesterday, I can tell. So I hope somehow you're able to find them and be reunited. But one thing I want to touch on before we wrap up here, because I think this is important, as tough as this has been, as you've gone through financial stress, health stress, just every kind of stress you can imagine, you've also found the time to help be an advocate, help other people that are going through this thing, change laws, things like that. Tell us some of the positives that you've, as a result of this terrible thing, some of the positives that you've helped with other people with.
Well, the last big thing that I was able to accomplish, bringing public awareness to family abductions or parental kidnapping, and let there be no mistake. Doing this to your children is child abuse. It is one of the most insidious forms of child abuse, as declared by the United States Congress in the Parental Kidnapping Act of 1980. It is akin to beating them worse than you can imagine, psychologically and emotionally. So when this happened, like most people, I fell prey to the myth that every child used to see on a milk carton or a shopping bag was a stranger abduction. But the majority of missing children in this country, aside from runaways, are family abductions. It's the most prevalent form of missing persons. So, like anything that touched me, I learned about it. I read about it. I studied it, and I was very blessed to have a law school education and to be able to articulate from my heart, because it's a passion. And my mom was a little Italian lady, 4'11", never weighed more than 100 pounds in her life, but she was the strongest person I've ever known. And before she passed away, she said to me, "Louis, God gives us only the tribulations that we can handle, and he gave you broad shoulders, so you have to handle a lot. And maybe he's asked you to sacrifice too to help millions." And that's what I've done, literally. When I appeared on the Today Show, I reached 200 million people by satellite. I have, like I started to say, to bring awareness in 2017, I was able to work with Clear Channel Outdoors, iHeartRadio, several other corporations, and the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. And I got $20 million worth of electronic billboard advertising across the country, featuring Chris and Lisa Mae and 4 other children on electronic billboards, over 1,000, and those cost about $20,000 a month to maintain and rent. And they gave it to us for free. And then in Oklahoma, I was able to go to the Supreme Court, like I mentioned earlier, and the landmark case of Zaharias versus Gammill is now taught in every law school in the United States. It's listed in the National Reporter System, which is essentially the encyclopedia of the highest court cases in the country. Legal journals, treatises have been written about it, and it's one of the most cited cases in custody law. Under the sponsorship of Senator Mark Snyder, I researched, authored, and lobbied Senate Bill 289, which established the tort of custodial interference in the state of Oklahoma, helping millions of parents and children in that state. And in the interim, as I mentioned before we were recording, I had a gap in my heart to fill, so I left the law and was a kindergarten teacher for about 7 or 8 years. And I have wonderful letters from not only the parents, from the children, of the positives that I brought into their lives as their kindergarten teacher. I was a big brother to an autistic boy in Ventura County, California. I've done a lot of volunteer work for the National Center, fundraising, child advocacy. I even gave a speech on attorney ethics in custody cases to the State Bar of California. I've done my best to spread the word, to let people know that what we have is an insidious epidemic in this country of 350,000 children a year being kidnapped by a family member. And it's creating generations of very damaged children, which we need to stop. And if I can help one child, which I've been told I have, be saved from an abduction, then I've accomplished a small part of what I hope to do in my case. I've had parents call me who are in bitter divorces and say, I saw you on Unsolved Mysteries or on America's Most Wanted or Missing Reward, and I was going to kidnap my own child, but after listening and seeing you, I changed my mind, and I'm going to do it through the system. And that's the reward. It's never been about dollars and cents. It's been about family and loving your children, and whether or not you can be there physically for them, but if you can't, to be there in your conduct and your actions for others.
Well, that's a great message and a great way to end the show. And I hope through all your hard work and endurance that you're able to help other people and help yourself and see your kids one day. So we'll do our part to help spread the word. And I appreciate you coming on to discuss this heartbreaking case with us.
Thank you so much, Mike.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Missing Persons. If you can provide any information to help solve the case we discussed in this episode, please contact the appropriate authorities.
If you enjoy this podcast, please take a moment to tell your friends about Missing Persons and invite them to listen to the show. Word of mouth will help us grow and bring these cases to a larger audience. You can also help us by taking a moment to rate and review Missing Persons on the platform you're listening to us now on. Just a reminder that new episodes of Missing Persons air every other Saturday. If you want to find us on social media, we're on Facebook at facebook.com/missingpersonspod. We're also on Twitter with the handle @missing_pod. And of course, you can find us and contact us through our website, missingpersonspodcast.com. On behalf of Jess Betancourt, this is Mike Morford saying thanks, and we'll see you next time on Missing Persons.